Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Paul and John. We're here to talk about, here's the title I came up for this segment, Enterprise Security Weekly's Quick Guide to Building a Successful Incident Response Program. I figured you could speak to this, John, as you teach SANS 504, which still, to this day, has a full day of training on incident response.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I broke it down into 6 steps. I don't know. I just kind of made notes on this this week, and after I jotted down my notes, I'm like, wow. I mean, I think I captured it for the most part. And there's a lot of offshoots to this, and there's a whole bunch more on the tools side of it, which I hope to get some of that more technical content on Paul Security Weekly. I'm just going to go through I want to see what you think of the 6 steps, John. You being the instructor of this day of 504 for quite some time. I was actually a student in 504 several years ago, and there was still the day on incident response and incident handling. So I define step 1 pretty much in anytime we talk about a sub-program within security. I start, really with the first 3 steps, but I'll relate them to incident response. So step 1 is know where your sensitive data lives, where it travels, and define different levels of sensitivity, even if it's simple as low, medium, and high. If you don't know where your sensitive data is or what constitutes sensitive data in your organization, you can't define the appropriate level of response in the rest of your program. So for me, that was step 1. Step 2, know where all of your systems and applications live and have a complete asset inventory. The worst possible scenario for me when I was doing live active incident response was, I was like, wow, look, that's definitely an incident. I'm like, I have no idea what that system is, where it is, or anything else about it. But I know there's an incident on it, and that's all I know. That's a bad situation to be in. Step 3, know who's responsible for every system and application. If you don't know who to call to respond to an incident, you kind of can't perform the incident response. I define ownership in 2 different levels, right? One is like the network systems and application, either administrator or developer, or more so the developer, right? So there's the people on the nuts and bolts level. That system's on that network, and they have their system, a network administrator. That's on that system, and it's that team of system administrators. But the administrators are just administering the systems in the network. The second stakeholder, if you will, are the people who use that system or application, right? The business people who are taking advantage of that application or that system to perform some kind of business function. They also have to be in the loop in this incident response process, so you have to know both of those people in terms of responsibility. Step 4, define who will be involved in the incident process and get buy-in from management. If you need the entire dev team or sysadmins to stop what they're doing and respond to an incident as you've defined in your incident handling guide, you have to have buy-in from management, because that's going to impact other things in the organization. And typically, if you don't get buy-in from management, everyone's like, why am I going to stop what I'm doing and do incident response? That's not on my goals that I'm getting paid for. So there's a lot of political issues in step 4. Step 5, define what constitutes an incident and how people respond in the different levels. This is typically where a playbook comes into play, if you will. So, for example, spyware is found on a desktop. The response might be create a ticket with the help desk, and the help desk will get to it when they get to it. Now, if a super stealthy malware is found on a system that contains critical data to the business, that could be a stop everything and respond to the incident in both IT and the stakeholders for that application. Step 6 is the most fun, I think, because you get to define how you will communicate during an incident, who you're going to communicate with, what you're going to communicate to the different groups, and how you're going to collect and track the data associated with an incident. The worst possible scenario is everyone is individually responding to an incident. They all have pieces of the data, and then you've got management, application owners, and users asking for updates on the incident, and people are giving them bits and pieces, and it just creates a big mess. I actually experienced this, and just creating mailing list aliases or email aliases goes a long way, and having some procedures to say, when we find information about an incident, we're going to distill it down and report it to management, and it's going to go to this list, and then they're going to contact the application owners. So those are the fundamentals that I would define for an incident response program. John, we're going to get your thoughts and maybe go off on a couple of different avenues within my list.
Sounds good. So I really like step 1. If you're looking at trying to start incident response, a lot of people try to jump immediately to tools. They try to find something that, integrates indicators of compromise across their environment. They try to get threat intelligence feeds, but they actually don't spend any time trying to get to know their own network first. And that's one of those main things that I'm going to be talking about in our webcast on the 15th. Next week, I'm going to be discussing that and how that knowing how your network is architected, knowing where your sensitive data is, without question, is the single most important part of having an effective incident response plan for your organization. So many organizations just flat out do not have that as well. So, and then the responsibility is interesting. Now, Paul, out of all the years that we've been doing this, how many organizations have we came across that they actually fully understand who is responsible? I'm not talking the administrator. I'm talking about the people that are responsible from a business management perspective for the systems that we test. I mean, we don't see that very often, do we?
Usually it happens after an incident occurs. And of course, doing a lessons learned is part of your incident response process, but usually it happens afterwards. And when I was at the university, dude, like this was a huge thing that I experienced, right? I would find a system that's compromised. I would know the administrator sometimes. I'm like, yep, that's in that department. I know who runs IT in that department. Call that person up. And then we'd get like these new people that we'd never met before. And they're like, no, you can't unplug my system. This is what processes the student loans for all of the students in the university, or this is what processes the credit cards in the cafeteria so students can eat. And the application owners would stand up and be like, what do you mean? What's an incident? I don't understand. So, and it's hard to reach out to those people beforehand. And then, there's the people that are like using and administering the application, but then it's like their manager. So you've got like the VP of operations, let's say, for your organization that's like, has to be involved. If they're not, they're going to come to you and be like, why are you shutting down my point of sale system or my, HR application or whatever it is? Like, you can't do that. So having all of those stakeholders involved is something I don't come across a lot until an incident or two has happened and those people have gotten involved and they're like, oh, like there's a process for this too.
Yeah. I also like step 5. Now, step 5 is probably the hardest out of all the steps that you've laid out. So I'll reread it. Define what constitutes an incident and how people respond to different levels. Now, that's interesting, right? You use the example of spyware found on a desktop, right? If you find spyware, that's one thing. If you actually find custom malware that's hitting your organization, it's on one of your critical servers, you would handle that differently. So being able to identify and say, is this a localized desktop level breach, or are we looking at something that's systematic across the entire organization? Breaking down those levels and understanding that you're going to handle those different levels of incidents with different approach. For example, if it's just a workstation with spyware, you're probably going to have help desk take care of that. If you have something that's systematic where they've stolen sensitive files across all of your different file shares, you're going to be handling that one different. If you're dealing with crypto locker type ransomware that hits your environment and it's starting to spread across your environment, can you integrate with your network management team to effectively stop it? So being able to do that is really rare. You just don't look at it as just a workstation being compromised, but looking at the different levels of the attacks. Is it a non-targeted attack? Is it a targeted attack? There's lots of questions to work through.
If you refresh the page, I put a link in there. Someone put together a GitHub page that basically outlines a whole bunch of incident response resources. And to speak to how difficult that step 5 is that you were talking about, John, people wanted like guidance on like, how do I create a playbook? How do I like know whether it's a malware outbreak or data theft or a DDoS attack, and then define like, certainly there's some pretty standard types of incidents that we could like get a head start. And in here, I mean, there's a ton of different resources for all kinds of incident response, but one of them is some example playbooks in there. Which is, I thought this was a great resource.
Cool. And let's also take, I was going to say also, whenever you're looking at incident response, don't look at it as step-by-step instructions to handle every type of malware that hits your organization, but rather think of incident response as a series of Legos. You're going to have a Lego for doing memory forensics. You're going to have a Lego for doing network isolation for a specific IP address or a specific port on a network. You're going to have a Lego for updating IDS, IPS rules or firewall rules. And these Legos become the capabilities within your organization. And then the cool thing about using those Legos is then it doesn't matter what incident you're working with. You can actually assemble those Legos to basically deal with any incident that comes across the wire in your organization.
See,
so don't think of it as like
that's what I was missing from my whole description. That just it makes it like actually consumable. I was missing an analogy. And the Lego analogy is absolutely perfect. This is where John shines. I can describe something and people fall asleep, and then John's like, no, wait, it's like Legos, right? And then you put it together, and people are like, wow, John's awesome. And I'm like, I was missing the analogy. Damn it.
I got this analogy from the Lego movie, to be completely honest with you. You know, where Elliot, he's like got this thing, and he starts building the crap really quickly, and I'm like, oh, that should be incident response. It should be like that. So. And if you're looking for products to you can plug into that are really, really effective and kind of inexpensive, one of them is CyberCPR. It's the only incident response platform that I recommend. It's by Steve Armstrong, who's a very good friend of the show and of the SANS Institute. And they have a free version that you can download and you can use for a limited number of users. But if you get larger, you can actually utilize it for collecting all of your different incidents, categorizing them properly, encrypting the data, doing encrypted communication. So check out CyberCPR and tell them that Enterprise Security Weekly sent you over.
Well, that's interesting because there are some free ones that are listed in this GitHub one. FIR, Fast Incident Response, Request Tracker for Incident Response, RTIR, and a couple of other ones in there as well. And then there are commercial products from, is it D3 Security and Bruce Schneier's company, Resilient Systems, which got acquired by IBM. So there's some commercial offerings out there as well. So I had not heard of CyberCPR before. I will add that to my recommendations. That's awesome. Communications is fun. People are always like, well, how do we communicate? I always recommend, I'm like, how do you communicate today? Like, do you have Slack? Do you use HipChat? Do you email? Google Hangouts? Like, how are you communicating today? However you're communicating via whatever technology you're using, integrate that into your incident response process. When I was doing incident response, we didn't have a lot of that fancy technology that we have today in the cloud. We had email, right? So, we had email buckets to collect incidents, and then we had email lists that went out to all the executives, because when there was a huge worm outbreak, right, the first time that happened, no one was telling management what was going on, and it was a complete cluster. And so we said, all right, there's a mailing list. Certain people can post to this mailing list, and it updates all of the executives when there is an incident. And then the executives would essentially talk to the business owners and the application users and say, yes, there's an incident, and here's what I know about it. And then also think about your users as well, right? An incident can be a DDoS attack that's taking out the network. It can be a phishing attack that's targeting your organization. How are you notifying your users and giving them the information they need to be part of that process? So basically, incident response involves everyone. So there has to be another method of communication. So in the university example, you find out where students get their information. Back then it was like a forum or a mailing list, right? Today, who knows what it could be in terms of technology, right? Could be a Slack channel, it could be whatever. Use those communications mechanisms and make sure you define, how you're going to communicate, and then what you're going to communicate, how often you're going to communicate, and follow that plan throughout an incident, because things can go really sideways really fast if communication breaks down or is done incorrectly.
Yeah, and that's one of the big areas that always creates the biggest level of contention, right? At the end of an incident, almost consistently, there's people that complain, like, you should have told this person, you should have told this person. And if it's not documented properly before you get there, it's going to happen. Even if you do have it documented, I think, Paul, you would agree, people still complain that the communication wasn't as good. So it almost never is right, per se, but you got to at least have some level of documentation stating how it should go to at least prove that you thought it through, and then you have something documented that you can change document-wise moving forward.
And I find it also interesting, John, that some of the feedback I get from people is that we still have this problem that I experienced several years ago, and it's still prominent today, and it has nothing to do with technology, but it's that when we have a security incident, security should just take care of that. And it's like, that is the absolute wrong way to think. That is going to make your organization extremely poor at responding to incidents. If everyone in the organization thinks, well, we have a security incident, security's just going to take care of it, like magically swoop in, riding on our unicorns, the incident is now gone, right? No, it requires everyone to do something, right? The network people might have to turn off some taps. The sysadmins may have to go kill some processes. The desktop team might have to go update some antivirus software. The users may have to be aware of a certain thing. Management has to know the impact to the organization. Everyone has to be involved when there's an incident. It can't just be, oh, well, security is going to fix that. No,
Well,
security is everyone's issue, so to speak.
And it also requires you to have some level of communication before it actually happens. Have a brown bag session where everybody gets together and you talk about the process and what people's roles and responsibility is going to do.
And bring Legos. Give everyone a Lego and make something in the brown bag. That'd be fun.
Exactly.
There was one other thing I want to talk about. Steps 1 to 2 and 3 are really just like knowing your network, right? I mean, that's just knowing stuff.
Well, that should be step 1, 2, and 3 for all of security.
Pretty much. Step 1, 2, and 3 pretty much
response.
applies to all security. And then, I don't know what it was. It must not have been that important. So, anything else on incident response? I mean, you teach a whole day of incident handling, John. Anything else on this? And I really want to ask you, like, what tools above and beyond the one you've already recommended that you really like for doing incident response?
Those are about the biggest one. I can tell you what not to use. I know some companies have tried to use like a wiki.
Mm-hmm.
We use MediaWiki for everything we do. Don't use a wiki. Don't use a wiki. CyberCPR. You mentioned Request Tracker for incident response is a pretty good one. Orion Live CD is another good one. So those would probably be the biggest ones that I would recommend. I think that we've already hit those.
Yeah, and then of course the technical aspect of it. There's a lot of forensics tools that come into play.
Yes.
Probably
well, that's
too
a
many.
whole different ball of wax.
Different ball of wax. I was looking at one called Rastria. Did you see that presentation when you were at Hackfest? It's from a SANS guy.
No, I must have missed that one.
Yeah, it's from SANS guy. He gave it at an incident response summit, maybe.
Yeah, to be honest, for the Hackfest, I flew in, I did my presentation, and I flew out.
Oh, it was at the threat hunting summit. That's why.
Threat hunting summit. That's probably something we should try to get into with offensive
probably something
countermeasures.
we should get into.
Yeah.
What's his name? Hold on. You probably know him. He's a community SANS instructor. He works for McAfee and created this project. You still don't know who I'm talking about? Hold on. It's getting there. Ismael Valenzuela.
Nope.
Alrighty. Well, he's a community SANS instructor and created it uses Yara basically to pull information from systems. So to delve into a little bit of the tech, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Nice. And kind of a last thing from me, we just went live, Paul. We were talking about this before the show. Check out Wild West Hackfest. We're tweeting on that right now. Paul and I are finally doing a security conference out here in South Dakota. I know I'm going to get Paul out here, even if I have to fly out, grab him, abduct him, and
when is this
out here.
I thought it was the World Wrestling Hellfest, WWHF.
It is the World Health. I can't even say it. You must have practiced that before the show.
Say that 10 times fast. The World Wrestling Hellfest, WWH. But that's not what you were tweeting about. You were tweeting about the Wild West Hackfest.
Yep, it's going to be October 26th and 27th in Deadwood, South Dakota. We've already got Johnny Long, Dave Kennedy's coming out. What's that?
Like next year.
Yeah, it is. We're starting to advertise this early,
Gotcha.
But it's going to be focused on trying to be the most hands-on security conference. We're going to have lots of villages for IoT and hardware hacking and SDR hacking and things like that. So check it out. It's www.wildwesthackfest.com, and we have a call for paper up and registration. And our marketing director, Paul Sierra, is going to be fired based on the picture of me riding a pony. That's on the front of the website. Did you put her up to that?
No. Wild West
all her.
Hacking,
she's taking full responsibility for that one.
Hackingfest.com. No, I wish I had that. Hacking like that without a G. Is that?
Yeah. We had to do that. So Sierra's here to give us a hard time. So here's Sierra. Everybody, say hi, Sierra.
Hackingfest. Hi, Sierra. I love the image. It's awesome. It is John. He's in full cowboy gear.
That's not how you get raises, by embarrassing your boss. Of course, she's then going to tell me she works for you too, Paul. But check it out. We've already got, of course, Larry's coming out. Paul, you're going to be there. We have Johnny Long. We have Dave Kennedy. Kevin Johnson is coming. I talked to Chris Gates, Darren Snubs. We talked to them at DerbyCon. We probably have to lodge their memory a little bit. We got Mubix. We've got Egypt. There's some people that I'm forgetting already. But no, we got some really, really great people that are coming out. And as we say to people on the show, you should too.
Well, I'll be there. If it's next year, I'm there. My calendar's open. Well, now it's actually full with the Wild West Hacking Fest.
That's everybody that we've talked to is like, hey, can you come to a con? And I don't know. It's a year in the future. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, then I can make it. You just got to plan these things out far enough, and then you start getting people to show.
Exactly. Well, that's awesome. WildWestHackingFest.com to see a picture of John riding a horse. It's more like John's face on an animation.
Yeah, it's not. It's not flattering.
Yes. I think it's awesome. Well, thank you, John, and thanks everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. See everyone next week.